sir, for your patience.
Good afternoon, Rick Curry, Director of Purchasing. Before you use contract award PUR 1406, Local Care Team Coordinator. Recommended motion to move to award the contract for Local Care Team Coordinator in Washington County to responsible proposer with the responsive proposal, Potomac Case Management Services Incorporated of Hagerstown, Maryland, amount of $52,000. This is a requirement of the Governor's Office. It is a one-year contract that will expire on June 30, 2019, with an option for 2 one-year periods through 2021. Also listed in the ARF is a list of the individuals that served on the coordinating committee. There was 5 individuals. The RFP was listed in the local newspaper on various websites. We had 72 persons download the document. We had 2 providers present at the pre-conference. The funding impact is through the Governor's Office. The award is unanimous by the coordinating committee. Also attached for your review is a scope of the work for the local coordinator. And if anyone has any questions.
Commissioners, questions, thoughts?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
First and second. All in favor say aye. Aye. 5-0. Thank you, sir. Next, we have the enhanced nutrient removal. Mr. Bradshaw, Mr. DeVito, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I have a change order here I'm bringing before you for Buchard Horn. It's to design the upgrade and provide project management services for the Smithsburg wastewater treatment plant. Back in 2006, the county advertised this project for design services, and the low bid was Buchard Horn. In the proposal, we had stated that we wanted to take the plant to 0.6 MGD, but since then, we've looked at alternative capacities, and we determined that the 0.45 MGD plant would meet the town's current needs and future needs for several years to come. So we are modifying our contract with Buchard Horn to change the design to 0.45, and part of that is for design services, and we also are deleting out the 2006 part of the contract that we will no longer be needing at this time. So they will be deleted out, and we're adding in the design fee of $437,376. The bidding phase will be $29,593, and the project management / inspection fees will be $542,064. And Buchard Horn will have the design completed with 180 days, pending MDE's review and approval.
Okay, the cost of that system is going from what to what?
The original, if we go to 0.6, would be $14 million, but going to 0.45, the construction cost will be $6 million.
I think if you remember I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, my microphone wasn't on. I thought in Smithsburg last fall we were given a $2 million amount or a $3 million amount.
We were. Since then, we received a letter from MDE that is lowering our effluent ammonia limits to 0.5, which was lower than what we originally thought the permit requirement was going to be, which requires us to add denitrification filters as part of this project. And those filters are housed in a building, a 30 by 70 building, plus the filters and all the electrical and pumping and mechanicals have now increased the budget to $6 million for construction.
And that's part of MDE's 2019 triennial review. We knew that it was coming, but we were anticipating a 1 milligram, a reduction from 2.3 milligrams for ammonia to 1. And when they issued the new criteria, which is under review right now, they lowered it even further to 0.5. And it sounds like going from 1 to 0.5 is not that much, but in terms of technology, it's a huge difference, and it makes it a large difference in actually the technology that we have to implement at the plant to achieve that. And that's where the denitrification filters became required The denitrification filters, I believe, were
690.
695,000 just to purchase the equipment,
Okay.
plus the building.
So the $14 million project cost, would that have gone up as well because of the regulations
No.
increasing?
Probably not. It was still been in the relative ballpark because we was already adding new tankage at the 14 million. We'd have had to take that into consideration, but the total
Basically-
effect, we don't know.
Basically, we have to go with this new regulations, we have to go from BNR to ENR technology. The .6, we would have gone to ENR technology anyway.
With that big surprise in money, is anything budgeted, sir, or?
Yeah, we actually had to make a change to the current capital plan that is coming to you and has come to you once before. The first number that we had in there was closer to the $3 million mark, and we did make an adjustment to that for draft 2, but that has not been presented to you at this time. And what would pay for that would have to be self-supported bond funding, which is paid for through user fees, such as all the other expenses that come out of the water and sewer funds.
Okay, thank you.
So, I guess I have a couple of questions. So you've had the discussions with all of this with the town of Smithsburg?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so they're all on board and comfortable?
They are comfortable with the 0.45 at this time, yes,
Okay.
provided that the 0.6 is not taken off the table.
Okay, that's fair. And then the other thing on the 14 million, Sarah, I know we originally had that much budgeted. Before our staff done an excellent job in finding ways to cut that cost, what's the maximum amount that budgeted item has ever been up to on the 14 million that we've actually had in place?
What is the maximum budget that we
What's the maximum amount of money that we've ever had in place towards that $14 million?
in place? We have around 2 million in place today.
We've never had more than that? Okay, that's all I'm saying. Okay.
Commissioners, any more questions, thoughts?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
First and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Next, construction bid, Poffenberger Road Bridge. Mr. Hobbs, you're up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Scott Hobbs, Director of Engineering. I'm here to recommend that the board conditionally award the Poffenberger Road Bridges, W4011 and 4012, bridge rehabilitation contract to the lowest responsible bidder, Lands Construction, doing business as Building Systems of Hagerstown, Maryland, in the amount of $1,392,814, and approve a budget transfer in the amount of $736,900 from account BRG 065 Poffenberger Road Bridge 4011 to account BRG 066 Bridge 4012. And part of the transfer is due to 2 separate CIP projects that have been in the works. We'd like to move that over to one project as we keep track of quantities and throughout the project. Conditional awards based on receiving concurrence and award from SHA. Project was advertised in the Herald Mail on the county's website, email marketplace. 3 bids were received and opened on February 22nd, 2019. Bids were evaluated and the low bid is in order. The engineer's estimate was $1,450,000. Project involves the rehabilitation of 2 side-by-side existing stone arch bridges over the Antietam Creek on Poffenberger Road, approximately 3 miles south of Hagerstown. One bridge is a 1-lane structure, simple span. The other is 3-span. The work would involve replacing the soil fill over the bridge arches with lightweight concrete and steel reinforcing, reconstruction of the stone spandrel walls and parapets, along with placement of concrete pier collars and parapet caps at both bridges. Work also involves installing road signs, new traffic barrier, and asphalt paving. This is a 200 consecutive calendar day contract. The anticipated notice to proceed is for late May 2019 with anticipated completion in late December 2019. and the start of May is due to stream restrictions, working with MDE on the permitting and the stream restriction dates. Bid documents include liquidated damages in the amount of $500 per calendar day for work beyond that date. The road will be closed, and the alternate detour is posted. Wagaman Road is shown. Garishop Road as a detour route. Fiscal impact involved the accounts BRG 065 and BRG 066. This is a federal aid bridge project. We utilize the program for 80% federal share and reimbursement through construction. This is the most cost-effective and practical alternative. The bridge was built in the early 1800s, 1840s. There were some minor repairs done in the late 70s, early 80s on most of these stone arch bridges. We have 14 stone arch bridges. Over the years, we've repaired 9. This will make 11 out of the 14 since the year 2000 with the techniques we've utilized. All within the Secretary of Interior standards, working through the Maryland Historical Trust and Department of Planning on those repairs to get their concurrence. The bridges are in poor condition, and these repairs are needed. So with that, if there's any questions.
You said you've made repairs to 11 out of the 14 stone arch bridges in Washington County?
Since 2000.
Since
For the
2000.
major stone arch bridges, the 14 that we have.
And then when will we have to start the process all over again for the first one you did in 2000? I guess what's the life expectancy of the repair? Is there
Right.
any way of knowing that?
For the major
I'm just
repairs, it's a long time. Typically bridges are 50 to 75 year lifespan.
Okay.
In this aspect with the stone masonry, we may need to go back and repoint 15, 20 years with minor costs involved with that. But the rehabilitation technique that we have with the lightweight concrete fill and the repairs that are made to the pier caps and the pier noses, there's going to be a long-term fix on those that.
Scott, it sounds like this is so, but just to verify, we're not using stamped concrete in any way. I know
No,
that
it's
takes away
all-
from the historical aspect of the.
Correct. We reuse the stone. The stone is all documented and then put back in similar positions as it is today. And that's all been through a review that we've had with the Maryland Historical Trust on the techniques that we use to rehabilitate the bridge, to preserve it intact.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second, first and second, discussion. Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Hey, Scott, this question off the agenda item. Is there, and I think you're the person to go through, all of the projects that we have going on in Washington County currently, is there a way for you to show the cost of the project and then show us the projects that are possibly going to come back with the cost savings?
Sure.
I'd just like to see all of those cost savings on the various projects to see.
Sure. Yes, we handle the roads, bridges, drainage
Okay.
projects, some of the building work. We'll provide that information.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Cascade Town Center.
Good afternoon. I guess I'll get things started here. Andrew Eshelman, Director of Public Works. I have a number of other staff members here as well who will be presenting. If you want to take time to introduce yourself now as well.
Todd Moser, Real Property Administrator.
Susan Small, Director of Department of Business Development.
Dan DeVito, Director, Division of Environmental Management.
Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer. I figured I'd stay over here due to lack of space, so I'm part of this as well.
Essentially, what we wanted to do today is give an overview of the Cascade Town Center property that the county owns, as well as seek some consensus and management direction for the property. As you well may know, the county assumed ownership of the Cascade Town Center September 2016 from the Penmar Development Corporation. Following that, the county entered into a master developer agreement with JG Business Link International, also known as JGBLI, in November 2016 to market, develop, and sell the property. And the county subsequently transferred 63 acres to them in September of 2017. The county remains the owner of 528 acres of Cascade Town Center property. The county leases multiple income-generating properties and is responsible for the maintenance of the lands and property, which does include a water system, sewer system, and electric utilities. As I mentioned, the county owns the remaining 528 acres of Cascade Town Center, which includes buildings, roads, lakes, dams, utilities, and an on-site water treatment system and network. The historic parade grounds are also included in that area, as well as the Fort Ritchie Community Center. The county has a number of income-generating properties, which as of FY19 year-to-date has generated approximately $18,000. I think that number is $21,000 following the last month. Primary income-generating facilities include the former Commissary Building 518, the Chapel Building 302, and the Cellular Communication Tower, as well as the Lakeside Hall Event Center. And you'll find in your packet there's a overview of the property with a number of those buildings identified on there, so you can see how they're spatially referenced on the overall site, as well as some other boundaries showing the property that was subdivided off and given to JGBLI, as well as the area where the cell tower is located and the wastewater treatment plant. The existing utility network for Fort Ritchie was and still is mostly privately owned, and therefore most systems up there do not have an individually metered account at the building, but a master account for the entire site. For this reason, the lease rates that we have charged include the utility costs, and the expectation is as development occurs, existing systems will need to be upgraded and or connected to the new infrastructure. Currently, the 63 acres owned by JGBLI is not metered for water, sewer, and electric, and the county would need to install those meters in order to bill for the usage. It is anticipated that a wholesale rate for sewer will need to be established, individual water meters installed on new buildings as development occurs, and a metered electric account created that the county would need to install, bill, and collect based on the usage until such time that new development is connected to the new distribution lines and substation. Primarily being Potomac Edison has new lines up there, and word is that they would want everything connected to that new count in order for them to set up a metered account. So it'd be incumbent upon the county to take action if we want to break out electric usage. So at this time, are there any questions regarding the information that I've covered?
You talked about installing, did you say meters?
Yes. So
if you would install a meter on a building up there, how would you determine how many EDUs that building would need? And then who would be responsible for the cost of the EDU?
I'll let Dan talk about the water and sewer usage up there, as it's fairly unique given we've already established.
Extremely unique because the way that it was set up before.
Sounds unique.
Yeah, with COPT in the beginning, and then it transferred to Penmar, and then eventually to the county. That because each individual building was not metered for water, and the water is generated by the water plant on the base itself. So all the utilities were billed through one meter that flows directly to the sewer plant. So that's the entire fort goes through one meter, and that was billed just based on whatever went through that meter. Well, now you've got this 64 acres that's subdivided. So what we're going to have to do is go in and either subdivide and put another sewer meter in.
63 acres?
The 63 acres. Put another sewer meter in that just isolates that part, and then or put individual water meters in. The water meters are problematic because we run the water plant, and the water plant would be based on individual properties. I think the overall picture, the overall game plan of the development of the fort had anticipated that a developer would.
But back to my question. We'll just
I'm getting there. Trust me, I'm getting there. The overall idea is that the developer would upgrade the system. And when he upgraded the system, that's the time that we would install individual meters. And if the developer was upgrading the infrastructure, then there wouldn't be individual EDUs charged to each individual meter. They would eliminate the allocation fees that we would normally charge on each individual building, that it would just be charged.
If they build a duplex up there, if I'm out in my community and I want to, on my property, and I want to build a duplex, I'm going to be charged, if I'm in that district, I'd be charged 2 EDUs.
Yeah, you'd be charged allocation fee, yes,
So
absolutely.
if they build a duplex, are they going to be charged 2 allocation fees?
If they were just doing a duplex, I would say yes, but I mean, right now, there's no way
Oh,
of
no,
doing
I
that.
understand all, I'm just, okay.
Yes. But again, if they're upgrading the system, and the idea was that it was a overall upgrade of the system, that a developer was going to come in and upgrade the entire system while they were doing an overall big picture development.
Any other questions on that part of the discussion? I'll turn the next section over to Sarah to talk about the financial aspects of the
Sure.
property.
So the current remaining fund balance, including the commitments of $150,000, which was brought to you last month, is a little over $1 million, $1,092,000. The monthly operating cost for Cascade Town Center is approximately $72,000 a month. So given the remaining fund balance, the approximately 15 months will be provided for. So we have enough fund balance to pay for the cost of Cascade Town Center until approximately April of 2020. Major annual expenses do include around $200,000 in wages and benefits, $150,000 for sewer fees, $65,000 for electricity costs, and around $25,000 for other utilities, and travel expenses are always fluctuating for that purpose.
Are water fees as well? You said, is water being monitored or metered?
The water isn't being metered. We have nominal charges for the chemicals and things that are used up there, so it is a line item in the budget. But most of the expense comes on the sewer side, where essentially whatever we generate, we need to pay Dan's folks to treat that. So even though it's still within the county, there's still a bill that needs to be paid for sewer fees.
Where is I&I involved in that with all?
That is a large,
That's a huge part of it, absolutely.
You think that was part of the, percent of the bill? With this?
It's a huge part of it. I mean, because of the aging infrastructure.
Sarah, I got a question. You might want to clarify, so it's, since we're on record, where this money we've been spending has come from. Some people have different thoughts of where it came from, but the money we're down to $1 million, where did it initially start and who supplied that money?
Yeah, the funding was transferred from the Penmar Corporation when the county took over Cascade Town Center, so it did not come from taxpayer dollars. And we have been using those funds for the past several years to provide for the costs of that town center.
Then it'd be on our dollar. In April of next year, it's going to be our dollar.
You got that right.
Gotcha. Thank you.
For the existing facilities or occupied facilities, how much would it cost to meter these? And then would we recover any of that cost? I mean, because I just have no clue the cost of
some of the accounts, such as the gas and the propane, already is being metered to some extent. So that information is a little bit more straightforward. Now we're talking about electric. That would probably be the next low-hanging fruit as for some areas. If we're talking about the subdivided property, that is almost on its own circuit. So we would actually need to install the meter and act as the intermediary if we wanted to collect in an interim period prior to the infrastructure being upgraded, in which case then Potomac Edison would come in and install an account of their own. On the water side, I think Dan can speak a little bit more. It's a little bit more challenging just because it's a looped network. And so there's questions of where do you install that meter? And then sewer, he can talk a little bit more about, as well, as there is a branch of the sewer line over there, at least for JG's portion of the property. Now, for each individual building, it may be cost prohibitive to do that based on the amount of money we're receiving on a lease basis. So, I mean, you want to add anything to that, Dan?
Well, I mean, and I think it's important to understand that we don't build for both water and sewer. We would build for the sewer part of it as and use that for usage. If we metered the sewer, we could allocate an amount of money that if, obviously, you can either figure out, meter the water and base the sewer charges off the water meter, or you could meter the sewer and base the water usage off of that. And the easiest way right now, we're looking at areas where we could actually install a flow meter that would capture the sewer side of it off from the segregated section, the 63 acres. And then that we could generate, and we would know exactly how much usage was being done
You're
based
saying
on
that
that.
would be cost prohibitive to do on the other buildings that are occupied throughout. And in those leases that we have with those, we're trying to recoup some of that.
On individual lease buildings, we can install water meters on those buildings, and that would be a nominal charge. And again, we would charge, it would be a matter of whether we would choose to charge allocation fee plus a connection fee, and then the usage, whatever the usage is, our standard rate.
Yeah, but if we already have a lease within this that has the utilities included, we couldn't throw a meter on there and say, hey, now I'm charging you utilities.
Correct. And I think we essentially adopted the same model that the owners before us did in terms of the leased properties, that it includes those items, because they were faced with the same issue, which is how do you figure out the allocation? You do your best based on the square footage, and you apply a factor to cover those items. And it's just cleaner for those tenants to know that if they're paying $1,000 a month, that it included the utilities as part of that. So that's where I want to make a distinction between the properties that we have leases with and other areas, as we have subdivided properties that are using utilities that we're paying for, and then going forward, if we continue to subdivide, what's going to be the direction as to how we treat those parcels. And also give consideration to that when we're drawing property lines, because it may appear one way on a plan view aerial map, but then when you take into account the utility network, there may be some other complications.
Thank you.
So moving on to the next section, the county does have a master development agreement with JGBLI, where JGBLI will act as the agent on the county's behalf and developer of the Cascade Town Center for the purpose of conducting general promotional and real estate development activities for the property. The agent has the exclusive right to market, promote, and advertise the center, negotiate potential sales and conveyances of real property to buyers, secure tenants for leasable space, and promote the development of the center to end users. Currently, as you've probably heard before, JGBLI has signed memorandum of understandings with many business partners to establish a basic framework for conducting cooperative activities. They have submitted and been granted demolition permits for a number of residential buildings. They're numbered 745 through 753 within the section of property that was conveyed to them. And I think their indications, in that, as they have reported, they anticipate work beginning on the demolition in the spring for townhomes, new townhomes. As far as active or pending developments on the county's remaining lands, there's currently no ongoing activity or developments.
Yeah, so this is the part we talk about selling it.
We can, the next phase, I was going to turn it over to Susan and Todd as far as the
Well, I'll wait till you turn
property.
over Susan and Todd, okay.
Okay. We'll
Then
let
I'll
them,
ask the
their
question.
portion's going to cover kind of the market analysis as well as the development programs that are.
We're sort of tiptoeing up to this point, so, yeah, it's very informative, though.
Okay. Susan, I guess it means you're up.
Okay, so the Cascade Town Center is not currently listed for sale in many of the real estate marketing tools available, such as CoStar, LoopNet, or our multiple listing service in the region. The preliminary market and comparative analysis was simply just performed by county staff by comparing similar properties of regional size, and it's included for your reference so you can see what we found in the area. The property is so very unique that it's really difficult to find something that's exactly matching, but the significant investment is expected to upgrade the infrastructure, so it's recommended that perhaps a third-party comparative analysis be performed, and then we would list the property with a sale price. The Cascade Town Center is also eligible from an economic development standpoint for many of our both state and local development programs and incentives. And they include, again, there's a list in there with descriptors for you, but the JCTC, the Job Creation Tax Credit, Foreign Trade Zone, the Tax Increment Financing District. It is just recently awarded the Target Employment Area. So there's several things available for any developer who would like to apply and would be qualified for those incentives. The breakdown is included, but you'll see the programs cover pretty wide range of opportunities, from property and business tax incentive to special exceptions for foreign investments and visa status, as well as priority funding to encourage development at Cascade Town Center.
Now we talk
There
about
you go,
selling.
Randy.
Yeah, didn't the governor make that a targeted employment zone just this past week?
Just received that this past week, yes.
Well, you know, I share your misery on try to get a price on this, because it would be a very tough. I tried it myself and I actually did okay, but I'm not the one that's supposed to do that. Here's what I propose. I think first step is we got to put a price on this thing. And I don't know if the commissioners agree. I think we just have to come up with a dollar amount. Tell our master developer, here's the dollar amount. Let's put it at. We don't have a dollar amount on it. We don't have. And someone will say that that's not the way to do it. Well, that is the way to do it. You know, I've never sold anything in my life I didn't have a dollar amount on. And we're going to be holding $1 million a year starting next April. So, you know, I think it's in everybody's benefit, obviously, to sell it, and I think it's everybody's benefit to sell it quickly. I don't know if a dollar amount, the easy part's buying it, the hard part's developing it. But I think but I think we need, I don't know if the commissioners agree or disagree, but I think the first thing we step is to take what you've done and all of us come up with a dollar amount and say, okay, Mr. Master Developer, here's what we want you to sell for. Here's 3.5 million. We'll take 3.5 million. Go find me a buyer. Now, if JB has all these $1 million, $1 billion investors, you'd think somebody would give us $3 million for this place, or $4 million, or $5 million, whatever the number is. You would think. So that's my biggest concern about all this. So, any comments, guys? I mean,
Actually, I've been thinking about that also, Randy, and I've thought about it another different way. But before, first, our balance. So if we were to sell this property tomorrow, what do we have to do with the balance remaining?
It's the county's,
So that would be our money, and then we could put that,
at your discretion.
okay, so there's $1 million. So my thoughts were, like he said, come up with an amount. And even if we had to be the financiers, as long as we have the security to back up the note, why couldn't we let someone buy it over a period of 5 years, something like that there? But we certainly would want to make sure we had everything in place, that if something fell through, we kept the money and we had something to secure it with. So,
With a reasonable down payment and a proper credit
yeah,
history.
sure.
so you're proposing us be the bank, but anyway.
I mean, if it got to that,
Right.
it may be, and that may not be the right thing. I'm just saying that was what I was
Right.
actually thinking. Gets it out of our hands, we have security, frees up possibly $1 million. We get a nice down payment, and
Well, I don't disagree at all, Terry. I mean, it's done every day somewhere.
gets it back on the tax rolls.
Yep.
It'll be generating some revenue there. But I'm with you. We've got to do something, and we can't wait any longer. I've even thought about just mothballing the place. We have $1 million there, and just figuring out how we can just really decrease our cost to make that $1 million last as long as we possibly can, longer than 15 months.
You know, the first step is to put a price on it. There's nobody in this room who can raise their hand that said they've sold something without putting a price on it. It doesn't happen. I don't care if it's a special. Our master developer, we give them a price and say, bring it. And then we come with creative ideas like you just had. The easy part's buying it, guys. That's what we got to figure out. The hard part's getting somebody who wants to develop it.
To make an additional suggestion, I think we need to do more than one price, because if there's somebody that wants to come in for a hunk of it, I'd say, you know, here's the discounted price for the whole thing, but if you want to buy this section, this price is, this section is this price, this section is this price. If you want to buy the whole thing, you get a discounted thing. And I do think that's something that we, like you said, talk to master developer, and they're here in the room and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Here's the area. Let's do it.
I think that does complicate it though, Court, by breaking it down in little pieces. I think you put one price on, they come in and want to buy the commissary with 10 acres, and we come up with a price for the commissary and 10 acres. It'd be awful hard to price each section separately or in pieces. I think you'd put it all at one and entertain, you know, subdivision, yeah.
Would it
We're going
be,
to entertain any, if someone comes in and they want just a certain piece of the property, we're going to entertain them anyway.
Yeah, I just think if they had a set number,
Right.
or you know, for different parcels, or you might get better interest because they see the whole thing is $6 million. You know, what is that? I just want that one little area, you know, and I would go to the master developers and say, hey,
Exactly.
what can we parcel out, and let's get a price on that, and let's go out and market and get this done.
I think the master developers would be given our opinion. Here's what we want you to get for the property. Please relay and advertise that it is available in partial subdivisions or
I'm in
subdivisions.
full agreement with any combination between those two ideas we can come up with. I suggested something a little similar last year with a sale, and you know, the concern is this money will run out soon, and it truly is taxpayer dollars. I think some of this might be taxpayer dollars if money was transferred from the Army when the fort originally closed. Some of that money's still in the mix. In essence, there's some taxpayer dollars there, and whenever the property was purchased by the Army years ago, decades ago, that was purchased with taxpayer dollars. So taxpayer dollars are at risk here. I'm ready to move forward with.
So what's our next step? I mean, I would like to, I don't want to kick the can down the road any further. What do we have to, and again, we just can't sit here and come up with I know what my price is. Let's get rid of it. My price is, you know, $3-4 million. That's my price. You know, and Susan did a competitive market analysis on it, and her price was at the very most a little over $5 million, which, no offense to Susan, it's almost impossible to come up with an accurate price. You could spend $50,000 on appraisals and never come up with an accurate price. To me, it has a negative value in some situations because of all the infrastructure issues and all the buildings. All that has to, when it's developed, you know, it's going to cost a lot of money to develop that property. So,
if possible, I think we should meet in our next meeting with the master developers and say, you know, discuss it and get a price. Get it done in 2 weeks. And let's say this is what we want for this section, this is what we want for this whole thing. Here's the price, market it. You know, and the same thing is what you said also.
Fairness to them, entertain their ideas on how we would market it and.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep. And the same thing with what you said. I would have no problem if somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to bring 50 employees on this property and it's going to generate this much of revenue. You know, and if it's converting over and taxpayers and you do it, I would have a much better inclination on saying, okay, I can finance this at that point, because then it's spurring development and I can lower the upfront cost to get 50 employees. But like you also said, Commissioner Kiefer, is that I need to make sure that they can do it.
There is a means to answer Commissioner Kiefer and Commissioner Monoshit's questions, and that is the 11-point criteria that are in the existing master developer agreement.
Right.
So those would certainly add value or perhaps detract value for the community and the commissioners. You may want to see that with any offer presented.
Right.
So.
I guess I really like the idea it's done every day somewhere, and it'd be basically owner financing, or for lack of better terms, or the county's the bank. Is that, I really like that idea. That is that, Sarah or Rob, does the county want to be the bank, or
That's the real question.
yeah, does the county want to be the bank? Is that a feasible?
Well, I think it goes back to the point of what's the ultimate plan for the property. So it's certain jobs that you may get income tax and so forth from. It's all about revenue, and what is it going to do for the community? Is it going to be a very pleasing application for the community? Then there's probably additional measures the county would want to take.
Well, then, and I would think that if we could pick and choose, and I would think it's good for the taxpayer. We're the bank. We get a sizable down payment. We charge interest on it. It generates more. I think I just wanted to make sure we can do that.
Would any consideration for callbacks on employment numbers be considered? If they,
I know it's difficult. I know you hate clawbacks.
They're painful. They're as painful as they sound.
But if you said you're going to hire 50 employees and you didn't hire 50 employees, I do think there needs to be some type of clawback. I know they're painful, but I think sometimes that payment is justified.
Yeah, our incentives actually don't go that
Right.
way anymore. So it's pay for performance. So they have to meet the standard before they.
You could do something with a clawback as long as you had a bonded or letter of credit or something to ensure you weren't going to lose everything that is being given away.
Right.
And I would also like to add to make sure that whatever position or whatever agreement that we move forward with, that price and that condition to sell includes the upgrading of the infrastructure, so that the county doesn't end up having to take that burden on in the future after the transaction's made. 'Cause that's a
Yeah, I would
significant-
think that's the way it would be. An as-is type of sale, here it is. You develop it. I mean, the easy part's buying it. It costs,
Amen.
I would, from my understanding, what we've discussed in the past is if it were to be sold, you get the whole kit and caboodle, and then as you bring it up to standards, just like any housing development, then we would take over the utilities or the public infrastructure portion.
Right.
That's how the last option was written.
Exactly.
And I think that's the big question mark, because we realize what the dollar figure is attached to all that. And so there's some question of if a developer would purchase that, they're responsible for the same costs that we have currently, and they would be carrying those costs until they would be able to upgrade the infrastructure, which is going to cost money, before they have development come online. So I don't know that changes anything, but it's the reality that that's probably the biggest hurdle in the marketing of the property, is the upgrading of the utilities and the costs associated with it.
So it sounds like we have some movement, at least in ideas, in one direction. I think we have some real estate professionals on the board, on staff, with our consultants. Can we get a plan in place to?
Do we, I'd want to have an answer by the next meeting, a direction. By the next meeting, I'd want to have it.
Something to vote.
I'd want to have something done. Yeah, something to vote on. Good. That would be my time frame.
Yeah, a few weeks.
I agree.
Now, you give me 20 minutes, I can do it now, but that's,
Go.
that's fine. Next meeting's fine.
commissioners with a consensus to move forward with the suggestions made?
Yes.
Yes, all right. Thank you very much. Sarah, you're up.
Save the best for
Oh, God.
3 hours delay. Thank you very much.
Where are we at?
Earlier. That we did. What's on an agenda item? That's what I'm gonna say. Put them on the agenda. No hurry.
I don't have a problem with it.
Go to
Good afternoon,
Way it's gonna be.
Commissioners. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer. I have with me Kim Edlin, Director of Budget and Finance. I do apologize, the agenda report form does have an incorrect number on it under the 5-step approach. Step 3, major safety request, does indicate a $4.3 million figure. That is not what you will see in the slideshow. That figure is $1.1 million for the record. And I am going to be presenting the operating budget today for the general fund on a high level. As you can see, I did have a very large binder, and you have probably seen that you also have a large binder. That binder does contain an extensive amount of detail for you to review. If you have any questions, certainly we're here to answer those questions as long as time allows. Okay. So first, where do our revenues come from for the general fund? It's important to note that 95% of our revenues do come from taxes in some sort, property tax or local tax. The other remaining 5% is generated from program revenue. And where does our money go? Many times we have presented where our costs are related to departments, and you would be used to seeing individual departments on the screen. Today I have a different representation for you. It paints a different picture, but one I think that is important to understand and to see, that our distribution to outside entities amounts to 54% of our general fund budget. The wages and benefits of county employees is the next largest portion, which is 27%. Distribution to other funds is 7% of our budget, and that includes the distributions to the capital fund of $5 million, and it also includes a distribution to highway, because we do fund primarily all costs associated with highway, except for the bit of user revenue, highway user revenue that we get. After that, you can see operating costs, which are our office supplies and other costs that we do need or that we have that is incurred on a daily basis to operate and function the county, is approximately 6% of our budget, and then our debt service is 6% of our budget. So this gives you a clear understanding of where our funding is going. I'm going to talk a little bit about revenues over the next couple minutes, because this kind of gets us to the point where we can have a real conversation about the operating budget. I will take time to discuss some of our major revenues. Certainly these are not all inclusive. We have an entire section on revenues and additional information related in the binder that you have. So real estate tax history. I've provided some history for you today just so that you can see where we are and where we've been. Our real estate performance is doing well. We are projecting that for 2019 to come in around $114 million. Our budget was $113.7 million, so that is on target, exceeding budget. That's what we like to see, 2% growth over the previous year. And the budget for 2020 currently is projected at $115.9 million, and that would represent a 1.63% over what we actually expect for 2019. That figure is derived from estimates that we get from the state of Maryland on our assessed values. The income tax history is not as nice of a picture here to discuss, but I want to spend some time talking about some of the things that you see on the screen. As you can see, it's laid out exactly the same as the previous slide. We have the budgeted figures along with what we've actually received the past couple years. You can see in 2018, our budget was $82 million, and we did only realize revenue of $77.9 million, which was a $4 million deficit. So something to note along with that is in 2018, we don't have all of our revenue until about August of 18. So we've already done the FY19 budget. Just kind of the same situation we're in today. We're doing the 2020 budget. We don't have all of our revenue in for 19. It's a projection. Where do we think we're going to end? And we have to use those estimates to project forward. You will see that there is an asterisk next to the actual figure on 2017 of $78.9 million. That asterisk is there to indicate that there were actually two payments that we received in 2017 that were more or less anomalies related to income tax revenue. We received a $600,000 payment for an audit that was done at the state level. That's a one-time thing. We're never going to get that revenue, or it's unlikely that that would be reoccurring. We also had a $1.1 million fiduciary payment that we don't expect again either. So while our revenue for 2017 did come in at $78.9 million, without those anomalies, it would have been $1.7 million less than that. Okay, and I think that's important for this discussion as well. As you can see, I have noted some comments. We've just received our February 28th income tax from the state. And with that, we saw a 31% decrease in estimated payments. The state has said that this large decrease in estimated payments followed a large increase in estimated payments from 2018, so that's why there's the decrease, and that increase in 18 was likely the result of taxpayer reaction to expectations of the federal tax cut. So keep in mind that taxpayer behavior does affect our income tax revenue greatly, and we can see that.
Pardon me, that was when everybody was rushed to paying taxes early to avoid higher federal tax, and we were slammed with that.
So, yeah.
Sarah, a question, and if you can't answer it, maybe this is just a comment. When we were in Annapolis, end of January, early February, and I remember some of those state legislatures coming in and talking about the windfall that the state was expected to receive, and you know how the Trump tax cut was going to increase taxes for Maryland, largely because in the federal, if you itemize or don't itemize, you have to do the same in your state income tax return. That was months ago. It doesn't seem like there's that huge windfall, or is the state receiving that, not us?
We're not seeing that yet. When we heard about that as budget and finance professionals, they had told us that we probably wouldn't see anything related to that until maybe 2020. But also, you know, we have to see that materialize. We have not seen those increases. The logic is there that we would see some increase. But, you know, there are people that, you know, maybe they would have taken the standard and now they're itemizing. So maybe there's a different effect that is being had. Other professionals in our industry have indicated that they are not planning for that windfall in their own budgets. So we see that from our level in other counties in Maryland. Other than that, just to note, it is important to understand that the federal shutdown did begin in December 22nd, 2018, and that extended through January 25th of 19. So there was probably some income tax related to that December period that we did not receive in our February distribution that we just got. Any questions on income tax? Okay. Another large revenue source that we have here at the county is our personal property tax. This is tax on furniture, fixtures, equipment of companies and businesses. So you can see here the 2019 budget was around $14 million. We are trending slightly under that right now. I have talked to Todd Hershey's office. We do have some later payments coming in, and this does include those payments that we expect to get, but it could go a little bit higher than that. Again, this is just an estimate. It is still, you know, within $300,000 of the $14 million budget. So not a terrible story here, just something to note, and that is why we have decided to present the 2020 budget to stay the same. So that's why we're not increasing this budget. We also do get assessments from the state that are in line with this budget figure. Another notable source of revenue, and I think this is the last one that I have to talk about today, is the speed camera revenue. So you can clearly see in 2019 the budget was $4.8 million. Prior to that, in 18, it was $2.4 million. There is a large difference there because in 2018, only half of the program was expected to be online, up and running to generate that revenue. during the time period where we were projecting 2019 revenues for speed camera, and of course the sheriff is here as well if we have additional questions, only 1 to 2 months of actual revenue had come in during that 2019 projection. So we had very limited information to go on, but we do have a budget of $4.8 million, and what we have seen is that taxpayers are responding, or our citizens are responding to these cameras, and they are slowing down, which is good, but we need to make an adjustment then to our revenues and put something forth for 2020 that's more realistic, that takes into consideration the steep slope that we've seen instead of that gradual slope that we thought we were going to see.
Sarah, on 2019, you have budgeted and then you have actual.
That's projection.
Okay, so
The actual is a
3 million
projection.
is still a projection
Yes,
also at
sir,
this point.
it
How
is.
close are we to that projection? Or you
The
wouldn't
$3
know?
million takes the most, the average of what we have received and kind of projects that out for the average for the remaining months. So that's kind of the best that we have so far. It may be less than that. It may be more than that. But I think it's a good estimate, but what it does is it makes us take a step back and say, you know, we really need to take some time and realign ourselves. We need to realign ourselves on speed camera revenue. We need to realign ourselves on income tax revenue because our budgets for those revenue sources are too high for 19.
Sarah, of the speed camera revenue, what's projected for 2019, roughly percentage, don't be exact unless you know the number, what percentage is going into our operating budget versus CIP?
Probably about 50%.
50-50?
Probably about that, yep.
Is that a concern, that knowing that we're relying on that as an operating source of revenue, that number is declining?
So it is a
don't quit.
concern. And as just for your information, the numbers that you see under the budget for the speed camera revenue, they are not net numbers. They do include speed camera fees. We have fees associated with the cameras. So they are not net numbers. They are total revenue numbers. Yes, it is a concern. We did have in last year's CIP plan, I know, a decrease, an incremental decrease for the speed camera revenue in the CIP plan. So year over year, we expected a little bit less.
Were we
Unfortunately,
decreasing on the operating side as well?
well, we figured there would be some amount that would be constant. It wouldn't at some point it's going to level out and we'll be realizing a certain amount of revenue year over year. So I think that, you know, in response to you, yes, we can see clearly those numbers were too high. For 2020 budget, the idea behind this number that you see in front of you, the 2.6, if you reduce that by the cost of the cameras, the net amount is 1.5 million, and that's what we had expected to contribute to the capital plan. As I continue this discussion, you will see we have some serious issues to look at, so that may change. But for your information, that was the idea behind this. Hey, we're not receiving the revenue we thought we would. How do we realign ourselves? How do we get past this? And yeah.
Sarah, when you say 50% goes into the operating budget, when it gets in the operating budget, where does it go?
To public safety expenditures.
That's by law. It has to.
It has to go into the public safety operations.
Public safety expenses could be on operation or capital.
Okay, yeah, and could I get a cheat sheet on what dollar amount is going, you said 50%, but what specific operational cost, and the same with the CIP?
So in the operating budget, the operations for patrol, public safety are in there by department, and we do not allocate every single general fund revenue dollar to an expenditure per se. So when we look at the operating budget, you will see a large expenditure amount that these funds could be paying towards.
Okay, so if we were to do away with the speed cameras, then how does that operational money get picked up?
Well, that's kind of what we're seeing in Budget 2020 with the idea that that $1.5 million that would be netted at the end would go over to CIP, so it would take that operational component out. And that's kind of what we need to continue conversations on as we move forward, because we can see that maybe we have to change that plan. I'm not sure. Okay, so that brings us to our actual budget discussion. I wanted to run through those items because I think they're very important and relevant to this conversation on how did our number from 2019 go from 229.6 down to 228.8. So, like we discussed, we've talked about income tax revenue, we've talked about the speed camera revenue. So we're seeing real estate revenues go up. We actually are seeing an increase in income tax revenue, but the budget is high, so we're seeing the budget deficit. So year over year, we are seeing some increases, which is good news because it's good for our economy. That's what we expect to see. We are seeing that. However, we have to realign ourselves. We had a large increase in budget in 2018, and so we didn't get those revenues in until August of that time. We need to realign ourselves on that front. So as we look at this slide in front of you, the general fund preliminary revenue number is the $228.7 million. With an $880,000 change reduction from the previous year. In addition to this, as I was obviously listening to the discussion earlier related to the SAFER grant, I think this is a good opportunity to reiterate the need for a sustainable revenue source for any future fire and rescue needs that we may have. So if we look at where we're at today, it's important to note that we have many mandates in front of us. Obviously, the one that we're all most familiar with is maintenance of effort, which is about a $2 million mandate for FY 2020. We also have increases in debt service costs, which is related to our bond issuance for our capital projects, and that amount is approximately $750,000. The third item you see on your list is health insurance with $600,000 attached to it. That may change. We go out to bid every 3 years for our health insurance. We have seen trends indicating higher usage and about a 15% increase over last year with inpatient admissions, medical pharmacy, and ER utilization. So these costs do affect us. We were expecting to have a 7% increase in our health insurance number, and that's largely where that figure's coming from. We're in the bidding process, we're getting those in, they're being evaluated. We're not sure where we stand right now. That could go away.
It could. So being on that on that committee, there is some potentially good news that those costs may come in lower depending on what the final bid numbers are. So that 600 could be diminished to a few hundred or even to zero. If the news is as good as we anticipate it may be. Just a shameless plug for the fewer claims, greater gains. This is all in the employees' hands largely. If we can keep those costs down on claims, then we can keep health insurance costs down that we don't have to pass any on to the employee. So yeah. It's a real team effort here between the employer and the employee to try to keep those costs down. Definitely preventative checkups and all those things help to do that. So that's a big number we hope to see go down significantly.
Yep, thank you. The other items, we have some contracts. This item, $435,000, includes general contracts that we have. We need to meet those contracts. Includes maintenance, contract services, includes inmate medical and inmate food. These are costs that we have to pay as a county, so that's why they're on this list. The other item, you see the speed camera fees. So $270,000, what's that for? We're seeing the speed camera fees trending $85,000, $90,000, a month. And that's across 25 cameras. I've discussed this with the sheriff who's here today. There may be a way to reduce that number. We're not sure how far we'll get with that yet. We don't have an answer for you today, but we are looking at it. We're trying to find some strategic ways to save money on those cameras, whether it, we're not sure what that will be today, but we are looking at that. Again, software for our employees and to do their jobs. We do have certain agreements in place where we have to pay for software costs. Again, utility increases, fuel increases. These are general increases that we have seen a history of increasing. We need to provide for those. We need to increase our budgets to provide for those costs. There's 3 items on here where you see asterisks, 3 asterisks beside them: the Police Academy, the Department of Business Development, and the Weed Control. These are on here because we will have to see an expense budget increase for these items. However, they are directly offset with revenues. So if we don't do the expense, we don't have the revenue. So they go hand in hand. So I wanted to be very clear about pointing that out. That's why they're on this screen in front of you. Other than that, we have some pending state budget and House bills with the election board. We're not sure what those will bring, and we're not sure, depending on what gets passed, we're not sure about the costs that we would be faced with that would be mandatory costs. We have sat down and taken a look at the bills that are out there and the possibility of it costing up to $450,000. Some of the costs included in that number are not likely to happen. So we need to know that going in, but they're on the screen because we want you to be aware of them. And the last item on the screen is the Narcotics Task Force Lab Services for $86,000, and that is related to a full-time and part-time personnel that are needed to keep the lab open.
Sarah, just for clarification.
Sure.
The items listed here, are these increases over prior years? Or are they just new items?
These are increases over prior years that we feel are mandated and that have to be provided for.
Okay,
yes.
Understood.
Okay. Okay. Step 3, major safety-related requests. We have approximately $1.1 million on here. As discussed previously, we do have a fire and EMS component. We talked about that briefly. In addition to that, there is an accounting aspect of fire and EMS of $100,000. I think Dave presented a $95,000 figure. Again, that figure would be there to provide for accounting of taxpayer dollars for those agencies. School resource officer funding assistance is listed here. There's no dollar amount attached to it. It's here to be recognized as, a request. We're not sure how to provide for that at this time. The firefighter turnout gear and the bulletproof vest that you see listed below are also major safety-related requests that we've received from emergency services, patrol, and detention. So those are on the screen for the safety related. Any questions on those items? Okay. Step 4 represents the cost for an employee step. The steps are currently 3.5%. That's where this figure is derived from, and that does include benefits. And step 5 would be county department requests and external agency requests. You can see on the left-hand side, we've got Board of Education, HCC, VFRA, the library, social services. These are all agencies that have requested, and the amounts that are represented are the requests over and above last year. We also have community organization funding up there. There was discussion at one point to see if we could increase that amount. So that's been put on this page for information. Day Reporting Center funding, $250,000. The grant has, we no longer have the grant. It has expired. Thank you. So we have that to consider. There were $750,000 in county personnel requests. Also on this, you'll see the Public Safety and Emergency Services Training Facility operational costs. So this is something just to keep in mind, not necessarily something for 2020 on that subject necessarily, because it won't be here then, but something to consider for the future. We have to think about how we're going to provide for operational costs related to that facility. And then the other thing that I realized while we were sitting here is that, nothing for Cascade is on this either. So if we get to that point next year in April where, we have to start providing for Cascade expenditures, that would be on this screen as well.
Sarah, a question. The Humane Society they're unique in that they have a contract somehow for an increase that's been negotiated by a board, a prior board. Not saying anything negative about that at all. Just for my understanding, so I was up in your office the other day and I forgot to get that information. Could you explain that to us, or if you need to get the documents and explain another day, that's fine too.
Well, I think that, it would be helpful if I had the document. I do believe there is a contract. I think that it's not mandatory, though. The increase related to that contract, I don't think is mandatory. So I'll get back to you on that, and maybe I can send it out to you as well for your information. Kim, do you know off the top of your head anything that could add value to that conversation, or would it be best to get back to them, get the agreement, and we'll get back to you?
Sarah, I'm sorry for skipping out real quick, but on step 4, I know the one before, you've got as the 3.5. I know we've had a couple discussions on changing the wage and step scale so that we can have 2.5 and have it more consistent, so that we can give more step increases every year. So do you know what the 2.5 number would be?
Yeah, so the 2.5 would be probably about 650,000 less than that. However, we can't get to the 2.5 without moving people to the new scale.
Yes.
That's something to consider.
And off the top of your head, do you remember what that cost was in moving to the new scale?
It was about, I think, 650.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to throw this all up in a big old mess, is with the new minimum wage increase, if we adopted a new step scale, we're going to be adopting a new step and grade scale the following year, basically every year for the next 4 years, since the step 1, grade 1 would have to go up.
If that passes and that is the way that the county determines is best to deal with that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep, understand.
So for clarification, step 4 and 5 are currently not budgeted. We made it up to the mandates and the safety, keeping all other budgets level. Step 4, we would certainly are looking for savings across the board that can swing the request under step 5, which was county staff asking for $750,000 more in personnel, to reverse that to actually get to consolidation where we can give the employees that are here today some type of increase. So we're looking for that. We're overturning every stone to try to bring you something that could be.
Right now, we're looking for money to give the employees a
Yes, we are.
step.
We are, and it'll take additional efficiencies, but it will reward the folks that have been here for being here, and that's one of our pursuits and our priorities.
When we say step, it's a merit step.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
So along with what Rob was discussing about getting to step 3, there's some ways we have to do that. As you could see from what was previously presented, we have less revenue to work with than in FY19. So how do we get to step 3 and take care of our mandated costs and take care of safety-related costs? How do we do that? So under considerations, we have before you some information related to tax increases. I felt that it was important to put this up here to make sure that everybody understood what it would mean for an increase. Income tax could increase of 0.01% would generate an additional $260,000 in annual revenue and would cost the average filer approximately 50 cents a month. Real estate tax raising by 1 penny would generate an additional $1.2 million in revenue and would cost each household approximately $1.75. Both options would require advertisement before a public hearing.
And that is something, I'll pause you now with the previous discussion earlier or this morning. You can see that your costs will go up after the SAFER grant well, more so next year, but definitely increased up to 65% reimbursement under the SAFER grant in the third year. So staff will be bringing back to you as a board some more information on this and listening to you as how you'd like to proceed with that additional revenue or additional cost savings if we can find those.
Question, can general tax revenue be dedicated?
General tax revenue, I think, could be dedicated if the board so chose. I think it could be. Do you have any objection to that? Yes?
Is that a bit of a red herring question?
Yeah, we don't mind if you have objections, but can it be? Is there a possibility of dedicating general fund revenue?
I think these are, what we would appreciate are these types of questions because we would be doing some work. Unfortunately, Kirk had to step out, but working with Kirk and Kendall on those types of questions legally and otherwise what the board would like to do. Definitely an information gathering mode right now.
A lot of information gathered.
Yes, yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so some of the other information that you see on this screen is the bullet point reimbursement payment for Maryland Theater, $350,000. So what that's related to is that would be a one-time reimbursement. The county has provided the Maryland Theater an additional $1 million, which you are well aware of in December of 2018. There's a possibility for the county to get reimbursement for some A&E costs previously paid for on the Maryland Theater. That was a joint effort between the county and the city. So that reimbursement could come back to the county to replenish the reserve fund, which paid the $1 million to the Maryland Theater. That's what that bullet is there for. Other than that, you can see that you can see what it would mean to the county to try to find a way to pay for our mandates of $4 to $5 million. And what that looks like is a reduction in the contribution to the capital plan. $4.2 million is going to the capital plan for things other than the $800,000 reserve fleet. In order to meet our obligations this year without any additional revenue, we would have to draw back what we contribute right now to the capital plan. That would affect not only this year, but several years thereafter, because we have $5 million appropriation going to the capital plan today in FY19. If we drew that back for 2020, we couldn't expect that in 2021 we would be able to contribute that $5 million back. So if this was the step that was taken, we would have to seriously revise the capital plan for especially the next 5 years to try to, over time, build that fund back up. So maybe in 2020, it's nothing, and we pay for very critical items with reserve funds. Maybe in 21, we start to try to build that up, maybe $1 million, not $5 million. This will have an effect on all of our county departments, but it is an option to provide for the mandates that face us today in 2020. The other thing to consider, and I'm not sure, are the contributions to the enterprise funds. So they are listed there for you, about $400,000 to the golf course, minimal amount to airport, and then a $450,000 contribution to solid waste. And then, as we've discussed a little bit earlier, consolidation of certain positions within the county is a potential way to save reoccurring operating cost. And, that's what we would look for to try to pay for some of these expenditures is reoccurring operating costs, not necessarily one-time savings. And the last slide for today in this presentation is just a listing of our capital projects. We talked about reducing the funding to that plan. So on the screen you can see some of the projects that would be affected by that and how they would be affected. Multi-purpose facility has been removed from the plan and will be removed for draft 2. Other projects that we would have to reduce would be general fund contingency information systems replacement project, Black Rock equipment, the Sheriff Fuel Center, vehicles for law enforcement, and the list goes on. Highway equipment would be facing a reduction of $1 million. So there are some serious projects that would be affected by this approach. However, at this time, that without additional revenue, that's where we're at. We need to make some changes so that we can meet our mandates.
Just as a follow-up from last week, I had an opportunity to speak with the sheriff about the fuel center, and I know I had brought up the possibility of using like local fuel gas stations for that purpose. I would be in favor of keeping this in our CIP budget, just my opinion. I do think there's merit to that. But maybe in the future, if there's other county-owned fueling stations, you know, if we could consider that as a possibility whenever that time comes.
Okay.
But I would like to see the Sheriff's Fuel Center stay in the CIP budget.
Okay.
We have some information on that. I think Scott has some as far as he's presented to the CIP committee, as far as reducing that from hundreds of thousands of dollars to perhaps $50,000. So with the existing center, fuel center, in other words, making it comply with MDE regulation at a much lower cost than relocating the center. So that'll.
Well, I'd like the sheriff to be in that conversation. Our conversation led me to believe that that would be a good move, a good opportunity for us. So
That certainly will be in the CIP. This is operating, but it is CIP.
This would affect, yes, if we had to draw back our dollars from the capital plan, that's something that would have to be considered through all of this too, so. Comments, questions, any direction on reducing the capital plan?
a request that I have, I'd like to bring up, and I know we talked about possibly bringing this up as a future meeting. I do think it's appropriate to mention it now because we're talking about the general fund, and when we talk about mandates, I think, to me, a good enough argument has been presented to me that the Area Agency on Aging, because it's an entity we are required to provide, I would consider that to maybe be, you know, certainly a mandate. And I'd like to see that in our operating budget as a line item rather than through the competitive grant process. And I'm looking at the Area Agency on Aging line item, not necessarily the Commission on Aging, because it's just in our part of our operating budget.
Oh, so it's not in this packet.
Yeah. So if there's consensus from the commissioners for that one line item, I would like to see it when the budget is presented, the draft 2 of the operating budget. I'd like to see that as a line item created, if there's support. It's just a consensus is all I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm not totally against it, just the funding source and how that would work year to year.
Yeah, so I think what we would do is right now, that dollar amount, I don't know if I have that off the top of my head, $500 and some thousand is in the community organization funding. So we would decrease the 1.7 million community organization funding by that dollar amount. So it's a net neutral effect on our budget.
Yeah, Susan, yeah, that's okay. Susan, let me ask you a question. Inside that funding, community funding organization, do they not automatically fund the Area of Agency on Aging automatically, that maintenance of effort amount that's required? So but there is a mandate for us to fund them at a certain level.
There's no maintenance of effort, though. 3 years ago, they...
Yeah, wherever it's dedicated at, I'm just throwing that word. So what are they required to have every year? Yeah, are they?
There is no amount that is a
amount.
requirement.
Okay. So I'd consensus to move it along, but we'd have to discuss how we would fund it every year and how we pull money in that.
Yeah, I think we would just decrease their CO up. And again,
we'd have to vote
for
on that amount
consistency's
each
sake,
year. We'd
it's
pull
kind
out.
of, yeah, it will go through our budget process.
My thing is, which we've discussed a couple times offline, but as there's things that I guess I can't give consensus at this point because I don't know what that number is going to move from the COF to the operational, because there's things that we're mandated to fund and there's things that we're not. And I agree that we need to move what's mandated over, but at this point, I don't know of all the things that the Commission on Aging does, only part of it is mandated. And that's the part that needs to move over from the
How about-
COF to the operational. And
How
so
about
I
this?
agree with you, but I don't know what that number is.
How about this, a consensus to get information and bring it back?
Can we create the line item, dollar amount to be determined?
You know, I'd like to wait to see what the dollar amount is.
And again, the reason I think this is important, I'm a stickler for consistency. And kind of like the Humane Society, they provide a service that the county's required to provide. I use them as a parallel organization, and that's the Animal Control Authority, that function of the Humane Society. That's why they're in our line item. It's a requirement that we as a county are to have. If the Humane Society picked up and walked away, wouldn't happen, then the county hires those individuals, or we find another avenue to fund that. So it's a requirement we need to have. I think that's why we put a level of precedent in our budget. And just like the Commission on Aging, if they were to cease to be a nonprofit 501c3 organization, that would come into the county's operating budget. Amy's counterpart in Frederick County and many other counties is actually a county employee. So I think there's precedent. I think there's reason to create consistency for our budget to move that Commission on Agency funding as a line item. I'd like to see that.
It'd be my request to wait to see what the dollar amounts are, not opposing your
Okay
request.
with Wayne. I'm ready to move forward as showing it as a line item in our budget.
If that's a motion, make
No,
it
we're looking for
consensus.
Just a
Well,
consensus.
my only part is I'd like,
You're
well,
not-
I'm
you're not
almost in
for it.
agreement
You're
with
not
you.
for it. Let's do the consensus. I'm for it.
I'm good with consensus.
There you go, you got your three. Determine the dollar amounts and how we'll do it. All right, that works good. All right, Sarah, you finished with your report?
Yes, I just have one last question. Is everything, I'm sorry, I'm moving along. Everything that I've presented today, we're gonna have staff working to cut the capital plan in accordance with what's been presented. I just wanna make sure
Well,
that is,
It's my understanding you have to, you need, or by policy, present us a balanced budget, correct?
that is correct.
So,
The only suggestion that I would make is I would look forward to adjusting the step scale so that we'd be looking at getting the step and wage scale adjusted so that instead of a $2.3 million gain or increase to get to step 4 so we can get to step 5, I would like us to bring back up the step and wage scale.
And
I'd be glad to do that.
also what I would like to do is keep the pay raise where it's at. And if we had to phase it in, if we could find some savings, possibly 6 months
well,
from
you're
now.
saying like half the first 6 months and come back in
Yeah.
January and do another?
Whatever it would take. Personally, I think we should, and I know we can't, our inflow should be step.
The way our current step scale works is that you can't half step, you gotta
Well,
take the,
I think what he's saying is mid-year or at some point in the year. So
whatever it would
we
take to
can,
get to that level of.
we have that,
oh, okay, do it in January.
we have that on the table in the
Some now, some
toolbox.
January.
We definitely have put that in the toolbox for potential solutions to try to bring back
We need
to
to
you.
get rid of that term toolbox.
Okay. I will say it if it's okay with everyone. Junk box, I'll call it a toolbox. So, thank you, sir. Yeah. 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 So, we're not thinking outside the box, though.
No more questions, are you finished?
Yes, sir.